specifically, we will discuss on the processes of communication. So how do we communicate? How do we convey, express our message to someone, be it in the academic environment or social environment, as the case may be. And also, we will talk about the different principles of communication, as well as the communication ethics. I think this is something that is very important, especially now during the rise of technology and social networking sites. I think people tend to forget that though we are connected with technology, we can connect with technology 24/7, they say it, but there are certain ethics that we need also to observe when making use of these communication tools. And I think when we talk about ethics, we're talking about what are the limitations, what are considered to be acceptable, and what are not considered to be acceptable or unacceptable. So we will talk about that. And today we will learn that there are certain things that we need to consider: process, principles, and ethics in communication. There is one objective for this unit. The objective is to describe the nature, elements, and nonverbal communication in various multicultural contexts. So I'll be showing you here pictures, different pictures. And what you are going to do is to look at the picture and then tell me what you can see in the picture. You will be given 15 seconds. Okay, the person who will answer will be given 15 seconds to respond and to maybe rationalize or reason out why you have chosen that particular description for the specific picture. Okay, so let's start with the learning outcomes. Prior to that, we have 3 learning outcomes. So one is to describe the meaning, nature, and importance of communication. Second is to demonstrate the elements and processes of communication. And the last is to describe the principle and ethics of communication. Okay, so let's start off tonight's activity with this, with activity 1. So you can raise your hand if you want to answer. However, if no one is volunteering, I might call on someone to answer. Okay, so these are the pictures. Okay, and we have here a timer that's 15 seconds. So in 15 seconds, what you're going to do is to give me your answer first. For example, I will ask you, okay, what do you think, what characteristic or behavior do you think does the first picture show? So you can describe it in 15 seconds. Okay, so I need someone's raising. We have Jan Philip, Logie, Nicole. Okay, we have 3 here. Okay, I need one more volunteer. Okay, complete. We have Sheila May Agos. So we will start with Jan Philip. Okay, let's start with Jan Philip. Okay, Jan Philip, can you please open your camera? Are you there? Hello? Okay, so wala siya. So let's have Logie May Magbanwa. Please open your camera and your audio.
Hello. Ay.
Okay, so Jan Philip is here. So you will be the first to answer, Jan. So please open your camera and also your audio.
Sir.
Okay, so the question is, you are going to describe the first picture, okay? And then
First.
in 15 minutes, you tell me the kind of behavior, or should I say, what kind of person do you think the first picture is, based on the hand gesture, based on the nonverbal, actions that the person here is showing, okay? So I'll say if it's your time to go, and your 15 seconds begin now. Go.
Sir, first picture I saw is body creating body language.
Okay, describe it. What kind of person do you think it is?
Um,
Okay, time is up. That's your 15 seconds. It's very short, right? So let me have, okay, thank you so much, John. It's a good answer. Let's have Logi May. Logi May, can you open your um, video and also your camera? And I'd like you to describe the same picture, also in 15 seconds. Okay, so first picture, please tell me what it is. Your time begins now.
Good evening, everyone. So the picture that we are seeing right now is actually the communication through nonverbal.
Okay, just the first picture. I'm sorry, there are three persons. No, I made a mistake.
Yes.
Thank you so much. There are four persons in the picture. I'm sorry, we only have one picture, but there are four
Oh,
persons here. Okay, so what you're going to do is to describe the first person. Okay, that's the most accurate question. So can you say it again? I'll give you 15 seconds. Your time begins now.
so the first picture or the first human that we see there is actually um, using a nonverbal to receive a message or
Okay.
information.
Thank you so much. So that person shows nonverbal cue. Specifically, we call it confidence. So, in the this is a sign of confidence when you are talking and you are using your hand gestures, to talk like this, for example. It shows confidence. So, if you are going to look at the person here, he stands erect, and the hand gesture is moving forward. Okay. So when you are talking like this, you are actually showing confidence to the person you're talking to. Okay. So let's have Nicole. Okay, Hervas. Nicole, can you please open your camera?
Good afternoon,
Okay,
sir.
hello, good afternoon. You're given 15 seconds to describe the second person. Okay, please tell me what kind of hand gesture is this? In as far as the behavior of this person is concerned, what kind of emotion do you think he is showing? Okay, so your time begins now.
Good afternoon. I think the man is showing respect the person who is talking to him or her to him. That's
Okay,
all, sir. Shows
okay.
respect.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole, for the great answer. Let's try Al Peter Ochida. Al Peter, please open your camera and say something about the second picture. Al, okay. What about Andrea Capunong? Andrea? Hello, Andrea.
Good
Okay,
afternoon,
hi
sir.
there. Hello, you're given 15 seconds to react on the second person's behavior or emotion. Your time begins now.
I think the second person is showing respect or thinking something or thinking something about of what are talking about, sir. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let's check. Actually, this emotion it means relaxed. So when you are relaxed, or probably you're not stressed, you are relaxed. So it can be a common expression, or should I say action, for someone who is relaxing, just relaxing, having a deep thought, probably thinking about something. You said that's sign of respect, but it's not actually bowing, but it's a sign of relaxation. Someone is relaxed, not tensed, not maybe talking to someone, but not tensed. maybe relaxed and comfortable with the person he or she is talking to. Okay, thank you so much. Let's proceed to the third picture. Let me ask Erica de la Cruz. Please open your camera and open your mic, Erica. And then Jason Alpis will be the next to talk. Jason, let's start with Jason first. If Erica is not, okay, so excuse, Krisha May. Okay. Jason?
Hello, sir.
Okay, hello there. So please react on the third picture. Okay, so your time begins now.
I guess the third picture are explaining something to her or his friends or classmates, something like that. I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. So explaining,
Thank you,
maybe,
sir.
right? Because you are like arms open. Could be explaining, right? So let's check on, okay, let's check on Mary Mercy's idea of the third picture. Mary Mercy. Are you there? Ayan.
Hello,
You're
sir. Good
okay.
evening.
Hello there. Hello, good evening. So please react on the third picture. Your 15 seconds begin now.
I guess the picture shows is like Jason nang he said that it ano again?
The person is
Explaining,
explaining.
sir. Explaining.
Okay, explaining something. Thank you so much, Mary Mercy. Let's check
Thank you,
on
sir.
the label of this expression. Actually, it's trustworthy. You made mention about explaining at something, right? If you want to explain something to show that you are a trustworthy person, this kind of action shows being trustworthy or trustworthiness because you're showing openness, right? You are not hiding yourself. You are not showing inhibitions. You're actually opening yourself. So that shows being trustworthy. Have you noticed that when you welcome someone, you always do this? Welcome to the family. That kind of action, welcome. So you're showing trustworthiness. You're showing that, the person you're talking to can really trust you because of that hand gesture. Okay? Now let's proceed to the final one. May I call on Senilin de la Paz. Senilin. Hello? Hello there. Okay, Senilin. What about Melchori Magbanwa? Melchori.
Hi, sir. I think the fourth gesture is strength
Mm-hmm. Why?
because of her gesture, I think.
Okay, so it's strength. It's the opposite of the third picture. The third picture is open, right? Oh,
Yes, sir.
like the hands are like this. But this one, it's the opposite, putting the hands on the opposite direction. Okay, so you have a point there. Thank you so much, Milchori. What
Yes,
about,
sir.
let's try Marie K. Sumagaysay. Marie K.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good evening.
What is your take on the fourth picture?
The fourth picture shows that like welcoming someone.
Okay, so it's welcoming someone. Actually, okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mary Kay. The third
You're
picture or the
welcome,
fourth
sir.
picture is strength. Tama si ano no, made mention by Melchori. She said that it's power. It's actually strength. You are right. This is the gesture for strength. I don't know why this is the gesture for strength, but as shown in the picture, it means to say that if you do this, it's openness or being trustworthy or honesty. But if you do this, it's more of strength. Okay, it's more of strength. But you did well. To those who participated in our short activity, you did very well. You're able to describe the persons here in the picture, and what they have shown actually are all non-verbal cues and communication. In communication, we use not only words, but also actions, right? And as they say, actions speak louder than words. And many people are so sensitive. I mean, they are very, like, they're very conscious about movements, about gestures, because these gestures sometimes come out naturally without being noticed. And I think this is something that we have to be very careful about. And of course, knowing nonverbal cues in communication, especially when you do public speaking or conversation with other people, even putting your arms on the table when you are eating have or has meaning in different countries. Okay, so it has special meanings in different countries. And now we're going to study this aspect of communication. So when you say communication, it means process of transmitting or conveying information to others. Okay, that's the very basic definition of communication. If you convey or express your thoughts or ideas to others, and that person is able to capture it, to understand it, then communication is successful. Because the goal of communication is just to transmit or to convey information to others. Maybe there might be some other reasons why you communicate, but basically that's the main goal of communication, to transmit and then to convey information to others. Whatever your motive is, the purpose is to transmit and to convey that information to others. It says here that a system for transmitting or exchanging information, example, telephones, computers, and other digital gadgets. During this time of technological advancement, we communicate not just face to face, right? We communicate even through virtual engagement, like what we're doing now. This is a form of communication. We communicate via mobile devices. Text messages now have become, or sending text messages has become one of the most popular modes of communication. People even maximize the use of messenger apps. I think we can send messages even if you don't have any data on Messenger, right? So that's something that I think even if you don't have a load, for example, you can send messages via Messenger app. So these advancement in technology have given us more opportunities to communicate and exploit the advancement of technology through the different tools, communication tools, such as telephones, computers, and other digital gadgets. It also says here that when we communicate, it is an act or process of using work, success, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information or to express ideas, thoughts, and feelings. Okay? I'd like to ask you, basically, what kind of purpose you are having if you use Messenger, for example, with your friends. What is the purpose of your communication with your friends? Is it about exchanging information or more of expressing your feelings? So, which means that in every group of people we are communicating, be it teachers or someone in the academe, classmates, friends, girlfriends or boyfriends, every platform that we are using, every mode of communication that we are actually using depends on the kind of emotions that we express in our communication. Have you noticed that when the emotion or when the information you want to transmit to someone is very confidential, many people do not use Messenger. Why? Because sometimes Messenger can be hacked. So if you are hacked, your confidential information might be known to everyone. That is why we at the office, when the information is very, very confidential, we normally talk face to face. That way, it would be safe. It would be safe for us, because sometimes when we use technology in communication, chances are hacking can happen. And if that happens, confidential information will be revealed, will be divulged. So that's why we can choose the kind of communication we want depending on the kind of purpose we have, be it at work, success, science, or behaviors, whatever it is, we use the proper tool for communication. But this is an act and a process, definitely. It is also a message that is given to someone, such as letter or telephone call. So any mode of communication, as I mentioned, that is geared towards conveying something, message, emotions, or whatever it is, that is a communication tool. It can be in a form of a letter. I think right now, none of you here have experienced exchanging letters, with someone, right? With the advent of technology, telephones, probably messengers, and many other online platforms have become the major platforms people use to communicate. But long time ago, before this technological advancement had emerged, people did write letters, and that is their form of communication, especially for long distance communication. It is also a way of sending information to people by using technology, radio, wireless, or electronic communication. That is why when we are doing this, for example, this online engagement, if something is not going well, for example, if your signal isn't strong, chances are the voice or the communication is not captured perfectly. Have you noticed that? Especially when you're experiencing intermittent connection. So that's a problem in communication, especially if there is an interference in the transmitting of information. So that's one of the barriers of communication that we will also be learning in this course, which is why in choosing a platform for communication, as I mentioned earlier, it depends on the purpose. And if your purpose is to ensure that 100% of your audience will be able to capture the message, then you choose the face-to-face, for example. Or if it is merely for information dissemination, then you can just have the messenger chat. You can do that. So as I mentioned earlier, the way of sending information depends on the kind of purpose you have, whether it's confidential or whether it's for academic or merely for social communication or interaction, so to speak. So when you talk about communication, it also is an intercourse by words, letters, symbols, or messages, and is a way that one organization members share meaning and understanding with one another. So it says here words, okay? We understand the words, right? We can read them in various platforms. Letters, for example. Have you noticed that now, because of the proliferation of emojis, people can feel the emoji more than the words? And I think even if you don't have the specific emoji, but just combining symbols, letters and symbols, you would be able to already share your emotions. So for example, for laugh, for example, right? Or sad, or, so sometimes emojis speak or describe your emotions more than the words can. Have you noticed that? And also messages, okay? But of course, when you talk about symbols here, symbols are not just the emojis that we can see on online communication. Symbols also are the non-verbal cues that we show, whether we're frowning or you are smiling, you are smirking, you are rolling your eyeball, okay, or eyeballs, you are nodding your head or simply shaking your head. So these are symbols that are important for us to consider when we are communicating. Japanese people are very subtle with their communication. Perhaps Filipinos are not so subtle, right? But Japanese are very subtle. For example, if they don't want to go with you for a drink, they have a different way of saying it. But I think in the Philippines, it's different because we can either say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I cannot go." I think we behave more like Americans than Asians, because sometimes we can say it. However, it depends also on the kind of person we're talking to. I think if we're talking to a professor or an instructor inviting you to go somewhere, it's very, very rude to directly say no to someone, right? Probably for friends, it will be fine. But with the kind of relationship you had with your instructor or your professor, it would be different thing. That is why we use words, letters, and symbols, and even messages differently in different types of people, in different types of races. That's what you call multicultural communication, because we consider ourselves already as a person who knows the kind or the appropriate things or the appropriate way of communicating with people. Now, when you talk about communication, it's an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by two or more persons. Have you noticed that when you're sad, you wanted to express your sadness to someone, and if that person is laughing at you, you get usually pissed off or angry or mad. Why? Because you are communicating sadness to that person. So you are expecting that person you're talking to show some empathy to you, to show some sympathy, probably to at least console you for your sadness, right? I mean, to boost your morale, so to speak. That is why in communication, we are not just communicating our facts here or our ideas or opinions here, but we also communicate our emotions. And sometimes when emotions are involved, it's better not to use words in communicating. Sometimes a simple tap on the shoulder can already boost the morale of the person. Have you noticed that when a member of the family of that particular person died or someone died, instead of saying words of condolences, sometimes we can just stop the person or hug the person, and then, of course, rub the back of the person. That's enough to console the person, right? So that means that, or to condole or to console the person. So that simply means that actions can also be our way of communicating, aside from the emotions, of course. It is a sum of all things a person does when he wants to create understanding in the minds of another. So very clearly said. Now, let's take a look at the components of communication process. You know already that communication is conveying, expressing ideas, information, thoughts, emotions, and it can be done in words, in letters, in symbols, and even in messages. Now, let's take a look at the components of communication. How does communication work? And how does the communication process interrelate to each other? Okay, let's take a look at the first component of communication process, which is the source. Okay, when you talk about the source, we're talking about the sender. And if you're the sender, you carefully crafts the message. Why do you carefully craft the message? Because your purpose is to ensure that the person who will receive the message will be able to understand it. What will you feel if you receive a message with XYZZXXZZYTWXYM? So you would be puzzled, right? Because that message is gibberish. You will not be able to understand it. It's nonsensical. But sometimes we receive such messages from people. So it is so difficult to actually decipher or to understand a statement that is not well written. That is why if you are the source of that information, see to it that your message is very clear and that it should, it should cut across. And for you to be able to do that, you have to make sure that the language you're using is appropriate. Because sometimes, even if the intention is good, if you use the inappropriate term, it can cause conflict with the person you're talking to. That is why it's very important to craft your message properly. Second, the sending may be anyone an author of a book, a public speaker in a special occasion, or even a traffic enforcer. So, which means that when you're driving, for example, and you see the traffic enforcer gesturing his hand to stop, you have to follow it because that's the message that he is putting across. So, you know, we always think of ourselves as the source if we are the source of the information. If we are not, then we have to try to understand why did the person write this in the first place. So, which is why it's very important to make sure that the message is carefully crafted. So, that's the source. Okay, that is why in the modern way of communication, I always ask the source whenever I receive a message. For example, someone would say, "Oh, there is no office tomorrow. It's a holiday." I always say, "Who said that?" Okay, and then if the person would say, "Okay, it came from the president of the Philippines," so of course everybody would say, "Ah, okay, it's a reliable source." It comes from the president of Fellowship Baptist College. So everyone would definitely say, okay, it's a legit source, right? Because the source in itself already manifests trustworthiness or authority in the message that he or she is saying. That is why when we are inviting speakers, for example, to speak a certain topic, we see to it that that speaker is really someone who's the authority of that topic. In that way, the source himself or herself would give justice to the topic. And that alone is very important in communication. Number one is the source. That is why when you see posts on Facebook, don't believe it right away. Always look for the source. And if the source is legit, if the source is trustworthy and can be trusted, that's the time that you believe that particular message, because it's very important. One of the components of the communication process is the source. And if you want to, if you don't want to be scammed, for example, if you don't want to be duped or to be fooled by, a lot of people, scammers out there, we have to always review the source. That's number one component of communication. Second is, we have to look into the message. What does the message say? Okay, is it for me? Is it for someone? Or what does it say in general? Well, the message is the reason behind any interaction. Okay, so why we are sending something or words or actions or anything that we're sending, it's because we want to send a message to that person. Because why we communicate? Because of the message. Okay? What I'm doing now is I'm communicating to you the ideas in the course. And why do I do this? It's because I want to communicate this to you. That is my purpose. And the purpose of the message is that, the purpose of interaction is that the message is the reason behind any interaction. Now, it is the meaning shared between the sender and the receiver. You have the source. You know who the source is. It's the president of the Philippines. What did the president say? That's the message. And this is the message that he wants to put across. So that's something that we have to consider. Source, and then the message. Messages can be in a form of poems, songs, essays, news articles, road signs, and even symbols. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, again, making use of our traffic rules, our traffic signs as an example here, unfortunately, some people are not really using traffic signs, especially in driving. Diba, when you are driving on the highway, you can see that slow-moving vehicles should be using the outer lane, and the faster vehicle should use the inner lanes. But as you can see, even slow-moving vehicles are using the inner lanes. So that simple message alone is not properly communicated to people. I think there is something that the government should do and must do. Perhaps people cannot understand the English statements. Perhaps traffic signs should be translated to Hiligaynon as well. There must be a Hiligaynon or a vernacular equivalent of these traffic signs so that everyone can understand it. Maybe that's my take on it. Why is it that people still continue to disobey these traffic rules? Probably because they do not understand English. That's one thing. And because our message is conveyed in different ways, in various ways, poems or poems, songs, essays, news articles, road signs, and even symbols, there is really a need for us to study all these symbols and be very familiar with them. Why? Because as we become adult and you become teachers in the future, you will teach the same things to your learners so that they too would be able to understand the purpose, the existence, or the use of these different symbols that we are using. And the purpose of that is for communication. Because as mentioned here, the reason behind any interaction is the message. There is always a message behind everything. That is why our goal, even if you are reading, for example, a novel or comics or whatever you are reading, our goal or the goal of that reader is to always find out the hidden message of that particular, work of art or whatever genre of literature that is. So that's the message. Now, the third component of communication process that we need to look into is the channel. What is meant by channel? When you talk about channel, you're talking about the signal, okay? The manner in which this message is being conveyed. What did you use? What kind of platform are you using? Are you using Google Meet, for example? Are you using telephone or mobile phones? Are you using Messenger? Are you using text messages? Okay? Because sometimes we believe that, okay, I have texted him a couple of times already, like 10 times, but it's not responding. Maybe he doesn't want to go. Okay? But we didn't realize that the channel that we chose actually didn't work. That is why channel is very important in making communication successful. Okay? So channel is the means by which a message is conveyed. As I mentioned earlier, it could be a phone call, it could be a notification, it could be a letter, it could be an email, it could be a messenger message or a message through messenger, a private message. It is the responsibility of both the sender and the receiver to choose the best channel for the interaction. Before, I think during the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, we were using Zoom actually because Zoom is one of the the best platforms for online gathering, for virtual engagement. But later we realized that our signal here in Cabancalan City, our internet connection isn't strong enough to support Zoom application. That is why we look for other platforms, and we realized that Google Meet is much better than Zoom, and that some people use Teams or any other platforms, in any other platforms for communication. And of course, people use Messenger and many others. So in short, when we communicate, we ensure that the channel is really good for interaction. I know that many of you here have experienced difficulty with internet connectivity. That's the reason why I tried to record. I'm recording tonight's engagement because I want to upload this to YouTube. For those who cannot really capture the message that I have shared with you tonight, you can review it on YouTube. And of course, others who are not in the platform right now, who just depend on modules, they can also review via YouTube so that they will be able to at least listen to the lecture on YouTube. So Channel is very important. And again, it redound, you know, perfect or success in communication also is affected by the channel. So if the channel is good, then communication also is good. But it's not only the channel that has something to do with, it's not only the phone call, notification, or letter that is being covered by channel. It can be that you are conducting, your lecture face to face, but the surrounding is quite noisy. Still, the channel isn't ideal for, that kind of engagement. Or you're studying, or probably you're communicating, and then someone is shouting behind you. So it's not possible, right? Or you are standing there and someone is standing maybe 500 meters away from you, and that person is gesturing or making some signs and symbols, and you cannot understand it. So because of the distance, the channel is affected. That is why we need the fourth communication component, so that we will be able to ensure that we are putting the message across. What is that? The receiver. The receiver of the message. Who is the receiver of the message? The person you are talking to. In our case here, who are the receiver of the message? You, the students. Me being the source of the knowledge. Source of the communication message. What is the message? Message here is about communication, the process, the ethics, and the principles. And what is the channel? We are using now Google Meet as our channel, and you are the receiver. So, in short, the receiver has also a take in ensuring that the success of communication is observed or is there. The receiver is the person who receives a transmitted message, maybe part of an audience in a public speaking event, a reader of a letter, or a driver who reads road signs. Okay, very important. Expected to listen carefully, jot down information, and ask for clarifications. That's what you are doing now, because I require you to submit individual note. And in that individual note, I would really appreciate if you write there significant insights in your individual notes, not generic statements that are copied from online sources, but something which are directly captured from tonight's discussion. That's what I really appreciate when you prepare individual notes, because as a receiver, you have this responsibility: one, to listen carefully; another, to jot down information; and the last, to ask for clarifications. What is the purpose of that? The purpose of that is to ensure that the communication message, or that the message is understood by the receiver. Because the goal of the source is to provide information. The goal of the receiver is to get that information. That is when they have to meet halfway. Both of them have to meet halfway. Otherwise, communication will never be successful if only the source is giving the efforts, exerting all the efforts, but the receiver does not do anything. Have you noticed that when someone is, or probably your parents, when they are scolding you because you did something wrong and you're not listening, sometimes you did not get the message, right? Or if a kid is not paying attention to the adult who's talking to the kid, well, definitely the kid will not be able to understand what the adult is saying. So that's it. Both the receiver, or the source, and the receiver have a take in the successful communication. Now, in order for the source to ensure that communication is conveyed, is expressed, we need to have a feedback. Feedback is very important. That is why, as you may have noticed, at the end of every lecture or every talk, the speaker would often say, okay, what do you have any questions? Or please ask some questions. So that is a form of getting feedback from the listeners to ensure that, or to, yeah, to ensure that the listeners have captured the message that the sender or that the source has conveyed. How do you do that? So it says here that it is essential to confirm recipient understanding. Have you noticed that? Of course, you will become teachers one day. So you would say, do you understand? Okay. That kind of statement is not an expression that teachers say at the end of the lesson. It is actually a feedback mechanism that the teacher employs so as to ensure that the learners, that the students are able to capture the message that the teacher has just shared. So that's it, to confirm recipient understanding. It can be expressed in various forms, like a simple nod. One of the assessment tools that I learned when I was in Japan was, normally they would just give a thumbs up, for example, if they understood, thumbs up or raise their hand. So these are common assessment strategies that the Japanese teachers employ in their class. Or sometimes they would ask one or two or three kids to share their reflections about the lesson being studied. So that's also one way of getting feedback. And later on, I want you to share your individual notes there, because I know that you're writing your individual notes. So part of our checking the feedback, whether, or feedback mechanism, whether or not you have listened to me intently and carefully, and that you're able to get the gist of our discussion tonight, is for you to share what you have written in your paper. So that's part of it. So that's our feedback mechanism. It can be written, like the individual notes, or it can be spoken or acted out. So later on, as I mentioned, I'll be asking some of you here to share your thoughts about our lesson for tonight, and that you can say it, in spoken words. Now, as I mentioned, um, the place where you are at the moment can also affect the success of the communication. And that is what we call environment. And the environment is very important. That is why every time we conduct webinars, we always tell the participants, please look for a quiet place, a place where there is no distraction, a place that you can concentrate, a place that is free from noise, a place that you can actually be, become an active participant of the engagement. That's what you call environment. So you have to look for a place where you can sit comfortably. A place that, as I mentioned, no one is distracting you. You are in your full focus. So that's very important. So what's the environment? It is the place, the feeling, the mood, the mindset, and the condition of both the sender and the receiver. It's very important that when you are communicating, the person you are communicating to is ready for the message that you are about to convey. That is why in class we always give motivation to prepare our students for the lesson of the day. And motivation is very important because it will not just whet their appetite for learning, but it will also prepare their minds for what they will be learning on that particular day. And the mood is very important, especially if it is in the middle of the night or perhaps in midday, especially 1 o'clock. That's the most unholy hour for teachers. So 1 to 2 to 3, 1 o'clock until 3 p.m. That's the most crucial hours that teachers have to really hurdle when you become teachers one day. That is why it's very important to always break the monotony in class. So if the students look bored and sleepy, always tell them to stand up and let's do something. Let's exercise. It's Zumba time, for example. So we have to always see to it that the mood of the learners are in tune to the kind of lessons you will be delivering to them. And in the same manner that when you are doing public speaking, you should be confident. I mean, you should be sensitive also and conscious with the kind of emotions or mood rather that the participants have. If they look tired and bored or disconnected, so you have to always find ways on how to bring them back to the realities. So mindset is also very important. So which means that your mood can affect communication. Have you noticed that if the sender is happy and then the receiver is sad or angry, even if the message sometimes is good, it will be misinterpreted by the receiver as a bad message. Why? Because the mood can affect your feeling. But sometimes, even if the message is not so good, but the receiver is very happy and gay, so perhaps the receiver would just take it positively. So, which means that, in communication, it's really complex. However, if we always or if we consider these components in communication, the source, the message, the channel, the receiver, the environment, the feedback. So it's very important because these will affect the total communication quality or the quality of communication. So it may involve physical setup of a location where communication takes place or space occupied by both the sender and the receiver, including the objects surrounding the sender and the receiver. So that's why I mentioned earlier that if you want to focus on something, it's important that you position yourself in a quiet place that is free from distractions. I would like to suggest also for you, dear students, because when you become teachers one day, and if you will be, if you will experience this kind of modality in teaching, you have to ensure that you have a learning space. Your learning space is the part of the house that you use every time you take the lesson. That part of the house should have a table, a chair, a good background, and of course, free from noise. That will become your learning space. Learning space is very important in distance learning modality because it will not just give you the good impression to your teacher, but it will also bring you to concentration whenever you sit there. Okay, it's study time, so I'll sit here. I have to dress up properly. Dressing up properly is part of your role, in communication, especially in the environment. You know, um, Especially in online distance learning, proper clothes that you wear every time you take a class is very important because just like face-to-face, online distance learning also um, is also considering or looking into the decency, in terms of clothing of the participants. And the seventh component of communication process is the context. So what is context? It involves expectations of a sender and the receiver and a common or shared understanding through environmental signal. Okay. If I say something, okay, if I say something deal, would you be able to understand the word deal if I say deal? Can you understand it? Of course, probably you will have different interpretations, right? However, if both the sender or the source and the receiver have common understanding on something, for example, both of them are planning to go to a party, and then the receiver said, deal. So they understand, both of them understand that the context of their conversation is going to the party. However, if I send you a message on Messenger saying deal, probably you would raise your eyebrows. You would say, oh, what is this teacher talking about? What is what is Sir Junri talking about? So you might probably be confused. What am I talking about? Because we don't have a context for that particular communication. That is why in communication, we need to have a context first. It's very important that everyone understands the context before you begin your communication. Otherwise, it will never be successful. What is the context of our communication tonight? Do you know the context of this communication? Can you type in the chat box the context of this communication? Why did I conduct this online class? What is the context of this communication? What are my expectations for this? What is the context? For you to be able to understand the lesson, right? So that you will be able to answer the module, because the module has series of activities there that you need to answer, and you will submit that module at the end of the term. So, which means that the context of this engagement is that I would be able to convey or express the insights, the ideas, the concepts about communication process, principles, and ethics. So, you see, if you understand the context of the communication, it would be easier for you to act upon it accordingly, right? Because if you don't know the context, probably you will just, you will just neglect it. You will not pay attention to it. But if you know the context, it would be easy for you to capture your audience. That is why it's very important to have that. Now, the last component is interference. And what is interference? One is known as a barrier or block that prevents effective communication to take place. What are the different barriers or interference in communication that we oftentimes encounter with online distance learning? Can you type it in the chat box? What is the common noise? Okay, according to Neri May, noise. Okay, noise. What else? Poor internet connection. That's right. So this is already, a common problem, not only here in our city in Cabancalan, but also in other parts of the Philippines. So poor internet connection really is an interference, because sometimes I'm still talking, but on your end, it's already, it's coming in intermittently. So it's very difficult. According to April Rose, it's lack of attention. That is right. Lack of attention can also be an interference. That's lack of attention, lack of motivation. Blocked message, okay? Blocked, maybe, I don't know in what manner it's being blocked. Is it because of the interference, or it's because someone, is trying to, to block the message from getting across? So there are a lot of things that can interfere as distractions, according to Lorme. So there are different kinds of interference. Time management. Okay. One is psychological barriers. So psychological barriers are thoughts that hamper the message to be interpreted correctly by the receiver. For example, if you are angry, sometimes when someone is joking, you will always take it as something negative, right? So, which means that you can never joke around at someone who's angry. Or if someone is is sick, for example, and that person is listening to a lecture, do you think a sick person will be able to understand everything? Of course not. Because, okay, so psychological. So it could be the emotions, rather. Okay, when we focus on psychological barriers, emotions. So emotions, for example, happiness, sadness, angry. So these are all. Now you have problems. So psychological. These are psychological barriers. We also have the physical barriers, and that's what is meant by competing stimulus, no noise, noisy environment, distractions, right? Weather and climate, health, and ignorance of the medium. So sometimes, okay, I don't know how to make use of the Google Meet. So I don't know how to talk, or how I can listen to the speaker clearly. So ignorance of the medium, or perhaps you don't understand the language itself. Or perhaps because of the weather. Here in the Philippines, when it rains hard, you have to expect that the communication lines would also shut down, or sometimes it will affect the quality of the internet connectivity. So these are physical barriers. We also have the linguistic and cultural barriers pertain to the language and its cultural environments. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't understand the language, for example, because it's in Japanese or it's in English, and the teacher made use of highfalutin terms and I couldn't understand it, that would also affect the communication process. Cultural barriers. Okay, some people might, of course, especially now, probably because we have Hiligay non-speakers here, we have Cebuano speakers here. Sometimes, you know, like this culture, sometimes cultures of our country, even in the Philippines, because we live in a diverse community, diverse culture. So sometimes the different cultures affect us in our understanding, because sometimes this is good for one group of people, but it's not good for another group of people. And sometimes communication is hampered. One thing I've noticed is with the Hiligaynon and the Cebuanos, because the Cebuanos sometimes, like us, we cook our vegetables sometimes in a different way. And the Ilonggos would often probably not like the way we prepare the vegetables, for example. So that kind of cultural, differences in culture can affect communication, right? It can be misinterpreted as something else. So that is why when we are communicating, especially if we have different languages, both Hiligaynon and the Cebuanos, it's very important we always consider the culture in communication, because that would impact the kind of meaning that you put through. Words may mean in different cultures. Okay, so others would say it's good, but in other places it would be different. For example, very classic example is langgam, right? Langgam in Tagalog, it's already an ant, okay, an ant. But to us, it's a bird. So that alone can cause interference in communication. I remember once we went to Manila, and then there was this taxi driver who was very persistent and insistent that we would take the taxi going to the venue. He didn't know that we knew someone in Manila who promised to pick us up, at the airport, and probably he promised to bring us to the venue. And then one of my colleagues said, uh, "Hindi kami sasakay sa'yo, may sugat kami." So the the driver was shocked, no? Was actually confused. Sugat, because in Tagalog, sugat, or in Tagalog, sugat is different. It's wound, right? But to us, sugat means fetch, like someone's picking you up. So it's kind of interesting, because that kind of communication is, there's cultural barrier. Linguistic barrier. So that's why the message is not understood by the receiver. Another interference is the mechanical barriers. So are those raised by the channels employed for interpersonal groups or mass communication? So for example, the phone is, broken, or the telcos like Globe, Smart, or PLDT are having problems. Okay, or maybe they have kind of upgrading or something, or interference because a transformer erupted, or a post fell down, something like that. So these are the things that can affect. Of course, aside from the broken phone, it can affect communication. Okay, like cell phones, laptops, and other gadgets that are used in communication, especially if your gadget is old. So it definitely has a lot of troubles. Okay, so that's the end part of our discussion for tonight. I've shared with you the different definitions of communication, as well as the different communication components. And also I've shared with you the different interference that we encounter when we are communicating. Now, before we move on to the application part, I'd like to ask one person or one student to share his or her insight about the discussion tonight? Okay, so maybe, okay. So let me ask, okay, someone's raising the hand. Nicole and Kate Justine. Okay, so you can begin. Let's start with Nicole and then Justin. Let's start with Nicole first.